Hello everyone, welcome back. I am faculty Amarachi from CapacityBay.org and I'll be your instructor for today's topic. In our previous class, we talked about HTML images, and in this section, we'll be talking about HTML accessibility. Without much ado, let's dive in, and as usual, we'll open up our Visual Code, and please don't forget you can always use any editor of your choice. We have Sublime Text also there, so anyone you prefer, you can actually use them to run this class. So like I said, we'll be talking about HTML accessibility. And when we are talking about HTML accessibility, we are talking about making your web page accessible to anyone and everyone in mind. And to do that, you have to make sure you use the correct HTML elements and tags. Make sure that they are used for the correct purposes. And it is always advisable to write your HTML code with accessibility in mind. You have to provide the user a good way to navigate and interact with your web page. This topic is actually highly underrated in our world today. Having accessible HTML means that people with disabilities can actually use your web page. So imagine someone who is maybe blind or partially or visually impaired. How can they use your page? So when we are talking about HTML accessibility, we are talking about making people like this, giving them the ability to use your web page. So that is what HTML accessibility is all about. It's all about using the correct elements, using the correct tags in your HTML codes. There are actually different ways to make our HTML accessible to people. And the very first one we'll be talking about is making your code as semantic as possible. When we are talking about semantic HTML, it means using the correct HTML elements for their correct purpose as much as possible. Semantic elements are elements with a meaning. Let's say for an example, we have a button. We have the button element. Now, this button, now we all know what this is all about. So let me quickly do something here. So I'm going to put click me inside. So I'm going to load this page. Now you can see having this button and having this click me inside gives me this. Now imagine I did something like this also. I use div, and then inside I have click me. You can see this doesn't actually, if I'm looking at this now, I will always prefer to click the first one to this, because this one doesn't actually have any meaning. It's just more like a written word. But then if you see this, definitely you would want to click it. So this is what semantic is all about. So this is semantic because it has meaning, and this is non-semantic without meaning. So someone actually using something like a screen reader, let me say someone who's visually impaired using a screen reader will actually identify this as a button. You get? And buttons have more suitable styling by default. A screen reader identifies it as a button and is clickable also more than what we have here. So semantic HTML gives context to screen readers which read the context of a page out loud. It is also important to know that a button is also accessible for people relying on keyboard-only navigation. It can be clickable with both mouse and also keys, and it can be tapped between. But when we're having non-semantic elements like div, like span, it tells nothing about its content. it tells nothing about its content. And when we are having example of semantic elements, we are also having, aside this button, we are having form, we are having table, and we also have articles. So when we are talking about semantic generally, it's telling you to use the correct HTML elements and tags for the correct purposes at all times. The next one we'll be talking about in our HTML accessibility is headings. We've treated this in the past, and headings, as we treated, are defined with H1 to H6. We have the now search engines actually use these headings to index the structure and content of your web pages. Users skim your pages by its headings. It is important to always use headings to show the document structure and the relationships between different sections. You can see the H1 is actually the biggest and the more bold, and then it's followed by H2. And I would want you to note that HTML headings should only be used for headings alone. You don't use like H1 to make big or bold text. We have elements that are there for it. We have the B, we have the I, we have the IM and others. So you don't use H1 element or H2 or heading elements at all to make text big or bold. H1 heading should be used for main headings, followed by the H2 and then the H3 as they are. You can see this is the major one, so you should use this for major headings. So the next one we'll be talking about here is using the alternative attributes for images. This is what I'm talking about. All images must have an alt tag describing the image content. It's not just a good practice, it is actually required by HTML standard, and your HTML without it is not validated. And also it's good to note that it also helps search engines. Now alternative text, like I just said, it also helps search engines at least to recognize the text also and to push it out to you. Now I want you to also note this: the alt attribute provides an alternative text for an image, like we said before when we treated images. If the user for some reason cannot view your image, maybe because of slow connection or an error in the source attribute, or if the user uses a screen reader, the value of the alt attribute will be what will be pushed out for the user. That is what will be used to describe the image. Now take for instance what I'm trying to explain. Now this image.jpg is not found because I didn't actually add any image here, but then I put an alt value with CapacityBay here. Now this is the display. Since no image can be found, it decided to bring this out. This is actually meant to be a description of what was meant to be here. So this is actually a very required attribute in HTML images. The next one we'll be talking about is declaring the language. It's always advisable that you declare or include the lang attribute inside the HTML tag to declare the language of the web page. This is Visual Code actually help us to bring this, but take for instance that you are not from an English speaking country. All you have to do is probably we have to change this to French now. So this will automatically help the search engines and browsers to know the language that you are actually typing in. It will help to declare the language of the web page. So let me take this back to English. So this actually specify that English is the language that we are working with. The next one we'll be talking about is the title attribute. The title attribute specifies extra information about an element. The information is most often shown as a tooltip when the mouse moves over the element. The title attribute can be used on any HTML element. It can actually be used on any HTML element, not just the P. Now, this is what it's trying to say. The abbreviation title here now, random access memory. This is what is showing here, RAM. But if I move my mouse on this, the full meaning comes out. You can see random access memory. It shows whenever the mouse moves. So it's always very good to use the title attribute, especially when you are using an abbreviation, so that the your system screen reader, for people using screen reader, can actually be able to recognize it. The next HTML accessibility that you have to have in mind, at the back of your mind, is proximity. Large amounts of interactive content, including anchors, placed in close visual proximity to each other, should have space inserted to separate them. This spacing is beneficial for people who suffer from fine motor control issues and may accidentally activate the wrong interactive content while navigating. Take for instance now on this abbreviation title here. If you notice, this RAM and is actually joined together. So imagine if this is actually a clickable attribute also, or a clickable value also. Anybody mistakenly, instead of clicking the RAM, I can actually click the is. So it's always advisable that you make sure that there is spacing between each of the elements that you are placing together. So it will actually help the screen reader also to recognize it, especially for people who are visually impaired. So always remember, proximity is actually a very important element in HTML accessibility. The next thing to bear in mind to make our web page accessible is use clear languages. Use clear languages. Always avoid using sentences that are short. Maybe instead of writing something like February, you decide to write Feb. This is not advisable, because something like this might not be easily or clearly read by a screen reader. So it's advisable you keep your sentences as short as possible. Avoid dashes. Instead of writing maybe February 1 to 3, it's advisable you write February 1 to 3. And also avoid slang languages. And that will be end for this section. Please, it's also advisable if you can actually make some research to learn more about this HTML accessibility. And if you have any question, you can actually drop it in the comment section below. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon to get notified whenever we drop a new video. And I'm actually excited because the next video coming in will be a hands-on exercise. So I can't actually wait. So see you in the next section. Please share this video. Thank you.